Right, good morning. The March 5th, 2026 Executive Committee meeting is called to order. I'm Executive Committee Chair Dave Summers, and I want to welcome everybody here attending both in person and via Zoom. For board members joining via Zoom, please turn on your camera and state your name prior to making any comments or asking any questions so the public and your fellow committee members know who is speaking. Katie, would you call the roll, please?
Angela Burney.
Here.
Board member Burney is present. Cassie Franklin. Thomas McLeod.
Here.
Board member McLeod is present. Ryan Mello. Julie Meredith.
Present.
Board member Meredith is present. Christina Walker. Katie Wilson.
Here, present.
Board member Wilson is present. Gurmai Zahalai.
Present.
Board member Zahalai is present, and Dave Summers.
Here.
And there is a quorum of the committee this time.
Great. Thank you, Katie. I don't have much to report except included in your meeting packet is the Q4 2024 Transit-Oriented Development Report, covering the status of the agency's various housing projects across the system. And while this item is not on the agenda for discussion, it's included in your packet for your awareness and review. So that's really all I've got. With that, I will turn it over to the CEO for his report.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to start by thanking Senator Murray and Senator Cantwell and all of our congressional delegation for securing $8.4 million in federal funds to support our region, the Seattle area, transit activities during the World Cup. When fans come to the Central Puget Sound from across the globe this June and July, they will be relying on our growing regional transit network to get to and from matches and lodging and fan zones. This money will help ensure those visitors have a positive experience during this historic event. As I mentioned at last week's full board meeting, our work on the STRIDE program continues apace. On Friday, I had the pleasure of joining members of the board, along with North Lake Washington mayors, council members, and many community leaders for the STRIDE S3 line groundbreaking. Getting to Friday's groundbreaking was the result of a dedicated advocacy by people who will eventually benefit from the new service. Their voices, their partnerships that they built through the years have truly made a difference. This vision of a bus rapid transit network along the 405 and 522 corridor will now become a reality in just a couple of years' time. Finally, earlier this week, I, along with staff, visited Olympia to meet with lawmakers about two pieces of legislation important to Sound Transit. The first bill, which we briefed the full board on last week, would grant the authority to take advantage of existing federal loans that have a 75-year term. That authority would help keep Sound Transit 3 projects on track by freeing up additional financial capacity during the program's most impacted construction years throughout the 2030s and 2040s. Passing the bill this session would allow us to have that tool to use as we put together a balanced long-range financial plan this year. The other bill would make targeted reforms to permitting processes that would allow us to carry out necessary project steps like acquiring property and applying for various permits concurrently rather than sequentially. That change would ultimately allow us to build faster and therefore build less expensively. I'm happy to share this bill successfully moved through both chambers after passage off the House floor last night, so now it is awaiting the governor's signature. I appreciate the board's advocacy. Many board members have been contacting legislators or testifying in front of legislative committees. It is very helpful, and your work is going to put us in a stronger position to deliver what the people have mandated. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any questions? Okay, all right. So we'll move on to public comment. The executive committee welcomes public comment as an important part of the public process. Comments are received and considered by the committee in its deliberations. Katie, can you share what types of comments were received for today's meeting?
Yes, the executive committee has received public comments from Betty Lau asking the board to include goals and objectives for the CEO, to ensure communities are heard and for negative impacts to regions such as the north and south of CID preferred alternatives to be avoided.
Thank you. And I see Board Member Walker has a hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. I missed roll call. I just wanted to make sure that my attendance was noted by the clerk.
Thank you. Okay, board members have received written comments submitted before the meeting, and we will post those on the Sound Transit website so the public may view them after the meeting. Katie, has anybody signed up for verbal public comment?
We don't have anyone signed up for virtual public comment, and we have 2 people signed up for in-person public comment.
Okay. So the ground rules for verbal public comment. Each commenter will have 2 minutes. Speakers should comment on the action they identified on the sign-up sheet and stay within the allotted time. All comments must be germane to the agenda items or items within the committee's purview. Speakers should not make introductory statements, derogatory remarks, profanity, or personal attacks. Statements related to a political campaign or statements for or against a candidate or ballot measure. Speakers should also not engage in conduct that disrupts, disturbs, or otherwise impedes the orderly conduct of this meeting, including conduct that is not germane to the committee's work or agenda. It's the only warning speakers will receive. Rules aren't followed, I'll ask for the microphone to be turned off. But we appreciate your adherence to these rules. So now I'll take in-person public comment. Katie?
Yes, the first person signed up to speak is Joe Kunstler, and following that will be Paul Pitkin.
Good morning, Sound Transit Board. Joe Kunzler here. I'm going to be hopefully a couple of concerns this morning. The first is I've reviewed the work program. I don't notice fare gates on there. I think it should be on there. I know it's a priority to this chair. It's a priority to me. We need transit fare gates because they allow for even more equitable fare enforcement, and they allow security officers to be more of a presence on the system so everyone believes in the system and we can counter the misinformation being put out there by right-wing propaganda. And then on the enterprise initiative, I have a few thoughts, and I'm going to, this time, unlike last time, I'm not going to call out individual communities because that bothers the chairman, so I'm going to be more general. I really believe fundamentally as you go through the Sound Transit program, and I'm looking at every single one of you, if you do not see a community that's willing to send people in t-shirts saying they want this project, you need to remember that when the costs go up. If you see a community that bases someone who attacks their neighbors, you might want to cut them off. And also, in the event that there are people in that community that want to engage in disruptive warfare. And with 40 seconds left, I want to use my hand to explain why. The costs are already climbing kind of vertically. According to this chairman, and I could be wrong, I believe that time is money and money is time. And so that makes the cost curve go up like this. When the costs go higher, we can't afford to do everything that we promised to voters. I think it's important we get light rail to downtown Everett. I think it's important we get light rail to Painfield. I think it's important we make sure that the world's best city in Redmond, Washington is connected. Thank you. And with that, as always, go Sound Transit. Thank you for your public service.
Thank you.
And the next commenter is Paul Pitkin.
Good afternoon, board members. I'm Paul Pitkin, Director of Fund Development for the Rainier Valley Community Development Fund. We are a certified community development financial institution focused on advancing equitable economic opportunity. Our organization exists because of transit construction. When light rail came through the Rainier Valley, our community partnered with Sound Transit and the City of Seattle to create a solution, one that would help small businesses survive disruption and remain part of the neighborhood's future. That continues to be our purpose, ensuring that infrastructure investment does not unintentionally weaken the communities it is meant to serve. Over the past year, we've appreciated ongoing dialogue with board members as well as Sound Transit staff under Dow Constantine's leadership. We've also recently begun working with Sound Transit to bring technical assistance to businesses seeking Sound Transit contracts. and are working with Sound Transit's Office of Civil Rights to continue dialogue with communities previously affected by light rail construction. On February 18th, we brought together West Seattle business owners, community advocates, elected officials, and Sound Transit staff at the Washington State Black Legacy Institute. I want to thank Board Member Teresa Mosqueda and Council Member Rob Saka for being present and engaged in that discussion. We welcome broader board participation moving forward. What we have heard was straightforward. Community members want a seat at the table to help safeguard West Seattle's cultural character during this period of change. We believe growth and community preservation are not competing goals. With intentional partnership, we can reinforce each other. The Rainier Valley Community Development Fund is excited to continue to work alongside Sound Transit to ensure inclusive, lasting prosperity for the communities we both serve. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Chair Summers, that's everyone who signed up for public comment at today's meeting.
Great, thank you, Katie. Okay, we'll move on to our business items. We have two business items on today's agenda. One is for final approval and one for recommendation for board. And for final action, we have the minutes from February 5th, 2026, executive committee meeting minutes. So is there a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? Yes? No? Any opposed? No? Any abstentions? All right, those are passed. Okay, for recommendations board, we have motion M 2026-09, and is required per the CEO Constantine's employment agreement. The board chair and vice chairs have worked to develop new CEO performance goals and objectives for 2026. So today we can have a discussion on the proposed objectives and goals, as well as consider an action to move these forward to the full board for their final action. So as noted in attachment A for the motion, we've established 6 goals covering the following areas. First, opening the Cross Lake connection and Pinehurst Station. Second is engagement with board members and external partners on enterprise initiative work and other matters. Third, ensuring a culture of operational excellence. Fourth, driving measurable improvements in rider experience. Fifth, champion value-driven leadership. And sixth, producing an updated TOD strategy to include pursuit of joint development opportunities. So those are in your packet. I'd like to open up any discussion on these draft goals. Any questions or comments on these? Anyone? Nope. Okay, Katie, do you want to read this into the record?
Motion number M 2026-09 is a motion of the Board of the Central Puget Sound Regional Transit Authority adopting performance goals and objectives for Dow Constantine, Sound Transit Chief Executive Officer.
Great, thank you. Is there a motion to forward this action to the board with due pass recommendation?
So moved. This is Board Member Burney.
Second.
Thank you. Motion's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Last chance before we get to the full board. All right. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Any abstentions? All right. So we'll move those to the full board for final action. So we also today have executive committee recommendations for Snohomish County and East King County Community Oversight Panel appointments. And before we move on to reports to the committee, we have discussion on those 2 recommendations for the COP. Board members from Snohomish County and East King County reviewed applications from people who live or work in their respective communities and would like to nominate 1 applicant from each. First, I would like, and I want to thank everybody who applied. There was great interest, and we had some really talented people, and we will look for opportunities to engage them in the future. But thank you for everybody that applied. But I would like to nominate Thomas Hinkson to serve on the Community Oversight Panel for Snohomish County. Thomas brings more than 40 years of experience in transit, including serving as the director of Everett Transit. Thomas has worked with Sound Transit in many capacities over his career and has a deep understanding of how important good passenger experience is, as well as how disappointing it can be when expectations are not met. Thomas has experience or insight in community engagement activities, project planning and alignment decisions, budget and financial plan, project schedule and budget adherence, agency performance audits, social justice and equity, and passenger experience. And I just hope the committee will move this nomination forward to the full board. And thank you for Thomas for stepping forward, and just a lifetime of experience also that'll be very valuable. So, Mayor Bernie, I understand you'd like to make a recommendation for the East King County nomination.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Chair Summers. East King County board members would like to nominate Fred Jarrett to serve on the Community Oversight Panel representing East King County. Fred has similarly been involved in this region's transit ecosystem for many years. He served on the Metro Council, chaired the Metro Transit Committee, and co-chaired the Joint Regional Planning Committee for High Capacity Transit. Not only that, but Fred represented Mercer Island as a city council member for 16 years and Washington State House and Senate member, all before acting as King County Deputy Executive. In addition to his experience in all facets of the region's governance, Fred brings experience or insight in project planning and alignment decisions, budget and financial plan, project schedule and budget adherence, agency performance audits, passenger experience. I hope the committee will move this nomination forward to the full board. And I also want to thank him and the others that applied. Mr. Jarrett is an exceptional candidate for the role that we have in this community oversight group. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, again, thanks to everybody who put their names forward. So unless there are any objections, I'm going to ask the staff to prepare an action for the board to consider at the March 26th board meeting to appoint these nominees to the panel. Are there any objections to that? Any other comments by committee members? Okay, well, we will do that. Move those forward for consideration at the March 26th board meeting. So moving on to reports of the committee, the first is our disparity study results, and I'll call on Edson Zavala, our Economic Development Deputy Executive Director, to provide some opening remarks and introduce Samir Bawa and Teresa Nelson from BBC Research and Consulting, who I understand are going to provide the report. So, Edson.
All right, good morning. So we're here to discuss the 2025 Sound Transit Disparity Study results. Next slide. Today we're here to provide an overview of the results of the 2025 Sound Transit Disparity Study, which is an evaluation of whether a person of color, women, veteran, and LGBTQ-owned businesses have equitable opportunities to participate in Sound Transit's contracts and procurements. No action is requested. Next slide. And again, I'm Edson Zavala, Deputy Executive Director of Economic Development within the Office of Civil Rights, Equity, and Inclusion. And I'm joined by Samir Bawa and Teresa Nelson, who I'll pass it on for their introductions and to carry us through the presentation.
Good morning. Thank you all for having us today. My name is Teresa Nelson. I'm a project manager at BBC Research and Consulting, and I'm the project manager who managed the disparity study. So thank you for inviting us to present our results today, and I'll pass it on to Samir briefly.
Good morning. My name is Samir Bawa, Managing Director and CEO at BBC Research and Consulting, and I served as the principal in charge on the disparity study.
Next slide, please. Excellent. So we have this brief little agenda of what we're hoping to discuss with you all today, and we'll begin by describing the objectives of a disparity study. Next slide, please.
So The primary objective of our study was to assess the participation of disadvantaged businesses in Sound Transit work relative to their availability or their estimated availability for that work. And the reason why it's called the disparity study is to assess whether there are any differences between those measures, and if there are, to help Sound Transit think through different program measures and efforts that it could use to help shrink that gap and support disadvantaged businesses in the marketplace, which by our definition includes businesses owned by people of color, by women, by veterans, and businesses owned by people who identify as LGBTQ. In addition to assessing participation and availability and any disparities that might exist, we looked at barriers that might exist in the larger marketplace that make it more difficult for those businesses to compete for and perform work on Sound Transit projects. And importantly, we also examine detailed characteristics about businesses that are either participating in Sound Transit work or are interested and available for that work, so that the organization can use that information to refine its program measures and target those businesses in the larger community that need the most support.
Next slide, please. So I'll begin with just an overview of our participation analysis and the results. Next slide, please. Thank you. All right, so we began by obtaining 5 years of contract and procurement data from Sound Transit. So we studied all of the contracts that were awarded by the organization from 2020 through 2024. In total, we studied $1.78 billion worth of work that was awarded over this 5-year period. And the contracts that were included in our participation analyses included contracts that were federally funded and not federally funded, contracts that included the use of participation goals and that didn't, formal procurements, informal procurements. The whole ecosystem of projects that Sound Transit awarded is included in this $1.78 billion. And our participation analysis really asked the question of to whom did Sound Transit award these $1.78 billion, to what types of businesses? So we report our participation results as a percentage of these total dollars. Next slide, please. All right, so on this slide, we have results for how those dollars were spent among diverse businesses. We report white women-owned businesses and person of color-owned businesses separately so that these can be mutually exclusive categories. Businesses that are owned by women of color are included within their race and ethnic group. Over the 5-year study period, Sound Transit awarded 6.9% of its dollars to white woman-owned businesses. An additional 6.8% of these dollars were awarded to POC-owned businesses, person of color-owned businesses, and within the category of person of color, we studied 6 different groups of business owners. Hispanic-owned businesses represent the majority of this person of color-owned business spend, with 4.5% of dollars being awarded to Hispanic-owned businesses over the study period. The remaining 86.3% of dollars, Sound Transit awarded either to businesses that are owned by white men that are not categorized as white women or person of color-owned businesses, as well as businesses that are publicly traded, businesses that are employee-owned, businesses that don't have the ownership characteristics to be classified in these first 2 groups. Next slide, please. So in addition to studying how Sound Transit's dollars were awarded to diverse business owners, we were also interested in studying how small businesses were faring in Sound Transit's contracts and procurements. And we also wanted to spend some time thinking not just about small businesses generally, but about different tiers of small businesses or small businesses of different sizes. The definition of a small business that Sound Transit uses in its contracting and that OMWBE uses when it certifies businesses aligns with the United States Small Business Administration's definition of a small business, which encapsulates businesses that can make up to $31.84 million a year. But we wanted to understand within businesses that make between $0 and $31.84 million, there's a lot of variation. So We first looked at the smallest small businesses, which aligns with the designation that OMWBE is assigning to small businesses that make $3 million or less, or emerging small businesses. These small businesses were awarded 2% of Sound Transit's dollars over the 5-year period. Our next tier is rising small businesses. They make more than $3 million, but less than $10 million a year, and they were awarded 6.4% of dollars. And then other small businesses, this sort of third tier, are businesses that make more than $10 million, but can make less than $31.84 million to be considered a small business. They accounted for more than half of all of Sound Transit's small business spend in the study period, with 11.5% of dollars. The remaining dollars were awarded to non-small businesses, 80.2%. So after studying participation results, we also wanted to understand how does the participation of these business groups compare to their availability in the marketplace. Availability is a measure of the degree to which businesses are ready, willing, and able to perform Sound Transit work. So we specifically measure availability by tailoring the businesses that we contact and that we survey to the transit and transportation related contracts that Sound Transit awards. We created a directory of thousands of businesses that have a location in your marketplace, this Tri-County region, and we attempted to survey all of these businesses by the phone in collaboration with a research partner. The businesses that completed surveys with us and provided information about their characteristics are included in our availability database and form a representative sample of your marketplace. So with this representative sample, we're able to estimate what percentage of dollars we would expect Sound Transit to have awarded to businesses with different ownership characteristics and businesses of different sizes based on their availability. So with that, I'll move to the next slide. I forgot that I could have been on this screen. We'll move to the next slide. All right. So here are your availability results, specifically for white woman-owned and POC-owned businesses. Based on the degree to which white woman-owned businesses are ready, willing, and able to perform Sound Transit work, we would expect them to be awarded 11% of dollars, or they're available for 11% of Sound Transit's dollars. Person of color-owned businesses are available for 17.5% of dollars. And once more, we break out person of color-owned businesses into different groups so that we can see the variation between availability for businesses of different racial and ethnic groups. Asian Pacific and Hispanic-owned businesses represent the greatest share of availability. They're each available for about 6% of dollars. We also study availability, on the next slide, please, by business size. And I'll spend a little bit of time on this slide here as we walk through this. We estimate that small businesses are available for almost 70% of the dollars that Sound Transit awarded during the study period. When we break down this 70% among the 3 tiers of small businesses, we would have expected emerging small businesses to be awarded 50.5% of dollars, or they are available for 50.5% of dollars. Rising small businesses, the next tier up, are available for almost 13% of dollars, and other small businesses, these are the largest of all small businesses, are available for 6.5% of dollars. I want to spend some time interpreting these results with you all because an availability result of almost 70% is a very large number, and I think it warrants understanding how we came to a number like this. The Small Business Administration estimates that 99% of businesses that just exist in the United States are small businesses. So the definition of small businesses is incredibly inclusive. It includes the overwhelming majority of businesses that exist. This is also true in Sound Transit's marketplace. The vast majority of businesses that exist in King, Pierce, and Snohomish counties are small businesses. And not only are they small businesses, they are exceptionally small businesses. Emerging small businesses make up the vast majority of the marketplace of available businesses. So in part, these high availability numbers are driven by the fact that there are just so many businesses that are classified as emerging small businesses that we would expect them to be able to compete for a lot of Sound Transit's contracts. Additionally, over this study period, over the 5 years, Sound Transit awarded contracts that are within the size and the capacity of small businesses. So the more small or unbundled contracts that Sound Transit awards, the higher the availability of emerging and rising small businesses because there are more opportunities for them to compete for work within their capacities. Next slide, please. All right. So taking these two parts of our analyses, participation and availability, we combine them together in our disparity analyses and present some disparity results. Next slide, please. So we calculate and we present disparity results as a disparity index. A disparity index is when we divide the dollars that were actually awarded to different business groups by the dollars that we would have expected them to be awarded based on their availability. And we get a result between $0 and $2 that I'll help interpret as we describe these results. A result of less than $1 or a disparity index of less than $1 is a demonstration of a disparity. It means that the participation of a business group was less than what we would have expected based off of their availability. And a result of less than 80 cents is a substantial disparity, which means that that business group was substantially underutilized compared to their availability. A substantial disparity metric is a key place to pay attention. It holds some legal ramifications in a world where Sound Transit or any organization would award race or gender conscious program measures. Of course, changes to the federal DBE program in October and Initiative 200 in Washington State means that Sound Transit is not operating any race or gender-based program measures currently. So the legal implications of these disparity indices are not going to impact your business inclusion programs, but they are a key place to pay attention to see how different business groups are faring in your contracts. Next slide, please. So as we can see on this slide, both white woman-owned businesses and person of color-owned businesses overall exhibited substantial disparities in Sound Transit's contracting. They fall within this pink-colored box from 0 to 80 cents that indicates the range of a substantial disparity. White women-owned businesses were awarded 63 cents on the dollar for what we would have expected them to be awarded based on their availability. And person of color-owned businesses were awarded 39 cents on the dollar. So like I said, the legal justification for race and gender-based measures may have existed if Sound Transit were able to implement race and gender-based measures because of these substantial disparity results, but these results will not have direct implications on program measures going forward. If we move to the next slide, I also wanted to just show you how disparity results break out across different groups of people of color-owned businesses or person of color-owned businesses. All 6 groups of person of color-owned businesses that we studied exhibited substantial disparities, though the degree to which those disparities were exhibited varies across different business groups. Next slide, please. We also present disparity results based off of business size. So in order to operate a small business program or a race and gender neutral program, Sound Transit does not need to meet as high of a legal justification as it would have for race and gender conscious program measures. So there are no legal implications to these results on the way that Sound Transit would operate a small business program. But we do think they're instructive results to help understand what is happening over this 5-year study period for businesses of different sizes. Emerging small businesses were awarded 4 cents on the dollar over the study period. These are substantial disparities for emerging small businesses and indicate that they were substantially underutilized compared to their availability. Rising small businesses fare a little bit better, 50 cents on the dollar, but this is still a substantial disparity. Meanwhile, other small businesses, these are the largest of small businesses, but they also make up the smallest portion of small businesses generally, exhibited overutilization. They were awarded $1.77 for every $1 that we would have expected them to be awarded. So the story here is pretty clear in how we interpret these results. There seem to be barriers for the smallest of small businesses in terms of accessing Sound Transit's contracts and procurements, whereas other small businesses seem to be faring very well and able to very actively compete for contract work and are being awarded that work to a high degree. We take the results, next slide, please, of our participation, availability, and disparity analyses, also informed by our community engagement tasks and our assessments of the marketplace and business characteristics to shape 12 recommendations that we give to Sound Transit in Chapter 10 of our disparity study report. So these 12 recommendations are high level spelled out here, but in particular, I want to focus on the two that are highlighted in red because these two recommendations are for the most impactful ways that we think that Sound Transit can be taking these results that I presented today and developing business inclusion programs to address the gaps that we observed. So to start, small business programs are a race and gender neutral tool that government organizations like Sound Transit have at their disposal to support all small businesses, regardless of who their owner is. Sound Transit operates a small business program for its non-federally funded work, and we recommend that Sound Transit continue to operate that program and that it continue to develop that program so that it be more tailored, tiered, and include more varied program measures for small businesses. Additionally, we recommend that Sound Transit develop a sister small business program for its federally funded work, which we call an SBE program. So small business for state-funded work, SBE for federally funded work. By implementing small business programs across the different types of work that Sound Transit awards, we recommend that Sound Transit use information from our study about the types of businesses that exist in your marketplace to tailor your program to the marketplace of businesses that sit right here within these 3 counties. We recommend the use of tiered certification because, as we saw on the results for emerging and rising small businesses, there are unique needs and unique barriers that emerging and rising small businesses face that a general small business program may not suitably address. So tiering certification and tiering different program measures to businesses of different sizes can help lift all boats of small businesses. And then our next recommendation here is also that Sound Transit set an overall aspirational small business participation goal. So you all may have been familiar with an overall aspirational DBE goal, which is still part of the federal DBE program. But here we're talking about small business spend, specifically the small business dollars or small business spend on non-federally funded work. We recommend that Sound Transit develop an aspirational goal so that the organization has a benchmark or a metric by which to compare all of the different efforts that Sound Transit undertakes to encourage small business participation, to have one overall goal that these efforts are contributing towards for internal and external accountability, and as a metric to see how well your small business programs are performing. We recommend a goal of 27.6% of dollars be spent with small businesses. And we came to this goal by looking both at the availability of small businesses as well as by looking at the past participation of certified small businesses and weighting accordingly so that this goal can be aspirational but also tied to the past participation of small businesses over the past 5 years, because it's important to inform a goal with what was actually happening, not just what could happen. Those are the end of my slides, I think. So thank you all for your attention. Thanks again for letting us present today. And Edson, Samir, and myself are happy to answer any questions that you all might have too.
Thank you very much. Throw it open for questions. And I guess I have one to start with. So seeing the rise or the increase in participation from rising, emerging, rising, and then more mature, how do you factor in just the capacity? It would seem like a very new emerging business probably has less experience and less capacity even to respond to opportunities. But how does that get weighed into, or is that the nature of your recommendations to really assist them get up to speed faster or competitive faster?
It's a great question. And there are a couple different ways that I can answer it. The first I can do is describe how we take into account capacity in our methodology. So when we calculate availability, we use a custom census availability approach, which means that we look at every single contract element, every prime contract and every single subcontract that was awarded over the 5-year period. And we look to see, maybe I can use an example. So if we have a subcontract for $5,000 of electrical work, we look into our availability database and we only look at businesses that perform electrical work, that can perform a contract of $5,000 or greater, that perform subcontracting work, and that can perform work in that region where that subcontract was awarded. So we only consider businesses available for that individual piece of work if they have the reported capacity to do that work. And then we aggregate the capacities and the availabilities across every single contract element, and that becomes your overall availability. So by the nature of our methodology, capacity is already taken into account for these businesses. But there's also qualitative insights that we gathered from business owners when we talked to them, from representatives of business development groups about the different marketplace barriers and the different sort of more descriptive qualitative pieces of what might limit the capacity of small businesses or what might make it difficult for small businesses to obtain subcontracting or prime contracting work with Sound Transit, and that shapes our recommendations. That sort of informs our approach of varied program measures that some businesses might struggle with financing. So we make recommendations that Sound Transit support small businesses' access to financing. Other businesses might need some capacity building. So Sound Transit's technical assistance can be tailored to help that, so that there are a range of ways that we account for capacity in the results. And then there are other ways that Sound Transit can start to address those different needs through the recommendations and the program measures.
Thank you. Thank you.
This is Board Member Wilson. Oh, okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I just wanted to make sure you knew that both I and Board Member Zahalai were raising our hands as well.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for that. I can't see there in the boardroom so well. Let's do Committee Member Walker first, and then I'll go Wilson and Zahalai.
Thank you, Chair. And I don't have any questions. I just want to thank the team. This was a really, really excellent presentation and shows the challenge and the work really well. And I look forward to working with our CEO on how we move forward on meeting our goals. So thank you for bringing it forward.
Thank you. Committee Member Wilson.
Yeah, thank you. I have a bunch of questions. So first, just in looking at the actuals for diverse businesses from the initial kind of goals of the study, it looks like LGBTQ plus owned businesses were also supposed to be part of the analysis, but I don't see any analysis for that. And then also I was wondering, so you said that the non-POC / woman businesses includes both presumably white male owned businesses and other models like you said publicly traded companies or employee owned businesses. Those seem like two pretty different categories, and it would be really helpful to see a breakdown of white male owned businesses versus those other categories, because I think that would give us a greater sense of the diversity kind of within the universe of contractors. So that's two things. And I was also wondering, just because I assume that there's probably overlap between kind of the kind of small business question versus the kind of racial kind of diversity question. And so I'm just wondering if you're controlling for business size when you're looking at the racial disparities, or like how much of the racial disparities are kind of explained by potentially by the business size disparities. And then I had one more question. So just in thinking, just given that the difference in availability and actual for small businesses is so huge, I guess I'm just wondering, I mean, that it kind of suggests like, oh, well, Sound Transit could just be contracting with like so many small businesses, right? More than they are. What are the costs there? Because I would assume that there's some real costs to contracting with many, many small firms versus a few large ones. Even if that work, like in principle, could be done by smaller firms, it seems like a huge logistical administrative challenge. There's probably a lot of risk there. So just wondering if that was looked at all. Like it's not necessarily easy to move in that direction as much as these numbers might suggest, I would imagine.
Thank you for all of those questions. I wrote them down, so I can hopefully answer all of them, but let me know if I miss anything. So first, you are correct. We studied LGBTQ-owned businesses and veteran-owned businesses. And I didn't present the results on those today, but they are included in our disparity study report. And I did write them down because I thought somebody would ask about them. So I can tell you, LGBTQ-owned businesses were available for 2.3% of dollars and were awarded 0.1% of dollars. So that's a disparity index of 6 cents on the dollar for LGBTQ-owned businesses. Veteran-owned businesses were available for 4.4% of dollars and actually awarded 1.5% of dollars. So that's a disparity index of 33 cents on the dollar. And LGBTQ and veteran-owned businesses are not mutually exclusive categories. So if a business was owned by a white woman who is a veteran and LGBTQ, that individual business would be showing up in the participation results for all three of those different breakouts. But yes, there are more details about LGBTQ-owned businesses and veteran-owned businesses than what we could get to today. I also wanted to answer your question about the overlaps between the disparities for different race and ethnic groups and businesses that are owned by person of color and women-owned businesses and business size. We spend a lot of time describing this in our report as well, but the vast majority of person of color and women-owned businesses, of diverse businesses generally, are also emerging small businesses. So there is substantial overlap for business groups there, which is another reason that we think that developing very well-tailored race and gender neutral programs like a tailored small business program is also going to have meaningful impacts on your equity goals as an organization, because by developing emerging small businesses, you are by default going to be developing a lot of diverse businesses. You're going to be developing all small businesses, but it's also an opportunity to tailor to business groups and to business owners who might need the most support in the marketplace. You asked a question about white male-owned businesses, and I think Samir is more prepared to answer that question about why we don't report results specifically for white male-owned businesses, and then the cost to more small businesses, which doesn't really factor into our quantitative results for the study, but I think Samir will add something there as well.
Yeah, I'm happy to. So the good thing is that as part of our disparity analysis results, because each group is exclusive of one another, and because we essentially all add up to 100%, that one can derive pretty easily what white male-owned businesses look like. And in this case, in terms of their outcomes, in this case, they are not underutilized. So they are overutilized when it comes to their availability for sound transit work. The reason why we don't report it is because disparity studies historically, both in our work and other disparity study firms as well, the focus has been almost exclusively on businesses owned by people of color and women. So when we report results, we typically focus our results accordingly to the outcomes that will most inform organizations' implementation of the federal DB program. So we tend to be as economical as possible in terms of what we write up in our reports, and they're already at like 300 pages. So we tend to focus on those groups that are of greatest interest to program measures that agencies are looking to refine or develop.
Can I answer the question about the cost to working for small businesses?
I do. And it's a great question. The question being, isn't there there's a cost, right? In reality, using more businesses may be less efficient. It may take more resources for an organization to sort of diversify in the more general sense where its contract dollars are going. That is absolutely recognized by us. We're aware of that. And I think it comes down to striking a balance, as with anything else. Where are the organization's objectives? And if it is to get more contracting dollars in the hands of more businesses, there's absolutely going to be a cost to that in different ways. But if that's a value that any organization holds, there may be some appetite to take on that cost. Just an example, even getting away from small businesses versus other businesses, POC businesses versus others, we look at the concentration of dollars. So how many businesses does it take when you look at all the businesses that were awarded dollars from Sound Transit to account for 50% of their dollars or 80% of the dollars? In a perfect world, you might have something closer to, if you look at 80% of the dollars, that 80% of the contractors you use, it would take to account for those dollars. That's not the case. What happens is that in lots of organizational work, at least with the organizations we've worked with, a small percentage of businesses that win your work account for a large percentage of those dollars. And from our perspective, that's an issue worth considering. How far an organization wants to go in addressing that issue, to some degree, is up to the organization, but reasonably, part of that calculus is how much does it cost us, both internally from a resource perspective, from a financial perspective, in pulling that off, and how far can we realistically go while we're still trying to meet the needs that we're setting out to meet. In this case, providing the highest level of transit services to the community. When we think of our overall aspirational goal, that's reflected in that to some degree. So if you wanted to set a goal based just on availability for small businesses, for example, that goal would be something close to 80%. But we also understand that that is a very pie in the sky, probably not very easily achievable goal. So that's why we also look at, well, what happened in the past? What is a more reasonable, achievable objective that gets you closer and closer to the path of fully engaging your small business community, which is why we look at that as well and try to calculate a goal that takes all that information to account so that Sound Transit can start going down the path of including more businesses as part of its contracting processes. Of course.
Thank you. Committee Member Zahalai.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, team. Very helpful presentation, very informative data. One of the things that I would love to get more clarity on is, what is the takeaway from the data? What should we be interpreting from the data as a whole? And it might also help to understand what are Sound Transit's overarching goals with respect to equitable contracting and procurement, and what does this tell us about where we are with respect to those goals?
It's a great question. We presented today the overall results. We can break out results 30 different ways, which we do in the report, but these are the highest level ones. And so I think the highest level takeaways from these results is that small and diverse businesses experience barriers in accessing Sound Transit's work. When we look at the 2020 disparity study, which we also conducted, there is greater participation between 5 years ago and today. So that is a positive sign that Sound Transit is making strides towards including a greater number of small and diverse businesses, but there are still gaps. And so I think these results help to highlight different ways of seeing where those gaps exist and different places where refining Sound Transit's programs can help to address those gaps. And that's, I think, takeaway number 2. In an ecosystem where you all are not able to use race and gender conscious goals to explicitly address some of these barriers to diverse businesses, but also taking into account that small businesses just need support. There are very thoughtful ways that you all can use the data that we bring today to tailor a small business program that is impactful and that reflects your marketplace. It reflects the businesses that have the biggest barriers. It reflects their needs, and that in some ways, a very, very well-refined small business program could possibly even be more impactful than a very general race and gender-based program. So I think that's the second takeaway is that these results don't spell the end to equity efforts for Sound Transit's contracting. They just invite some creativity. And I think that's also a great opportunity for Sound Transit. We're seeing a lot of organizations across the country use creative approaches to their race and gender neutral environments, and you all are ahead of that because this has been an environment you've been working in for a very long time. But I think that's the other takeaway is let's get creative and let's see how we can continue to meet the moment with the way that these results inform what's happening.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Do we have a sense for how close the recommendations that you have made with the race and gender neutral small business programs, how close can those get us to our goals of equity and closing the gaps that you described? Obviously, they're not going to be the most effective tools because of state limitations, but how close can they get us?
It's a good question. I don't know if we have quantitative ways to answer that question today, but maybe you have some ideas.
Yeah, I've got some ideas. So as part of these studies, at least the studies we've done going back to 2012 for Sound Transit, one measurement we look at is what's going on in your contracting when you use race and gender-based goals and when you don't. And historically, that those differences in outcomes have been pretty stark, right? Outcomes are just better for POC and women-owned businesses when you use race and gender-based goals. That's not surprising. I think in this, I don't want to call it a new world because these are policy decisions, right? There haven't been changes in constitutional standards or laws, despite what you might hear from mass media and the administration, the federal administration. But I think that there are a lot more teeth and opportunities to better serve small businesses when you don't consider them a monolith. When you recognize the fact that not all small businesses are created equal, and if the SBA has a definition that includes 99+% of businesses, maybe there's room for a better definition, and that's what we're aiming for. And what comes out of that, I think, are better programs. So what I'm anticipating, even though we can't answer the question right now of how close can we get with the use of race and gender neutral measures to what you all have been using in the past, I think with better, stronger, more targeted programs, I've got some level of confidence as we do collectively that there's a lot of good that Sound Transit can still do as long as it's making full use of the data that comes out of studies like this and creating smart programs that listen to the community, that acknowledge what their barriers are and what outcomes look like, and creating a program accordingly. And not to say that Sound Transit wasn't doing a good job with small business programs in the past, it's just that the stakes have gotten higher. And I think with that motivation and some of the information that we can take advantage of, I think we can do a lot of good collectively.
Thank you so much. Last question, I promise. I know that you are not recommending action today, but what is the general timeline of action for the board?
So there's no action right now, but we will be digesting the recommendations, the full set of recommendations from BBC, and we'll be looking at what kind of program updates we will need to accomplish. And if and when that time comes, we will follow up to provide an update and any next steps as we proceed through the recommendations.
Thank you so much.
This is Board Member McLeod. I have a question.
Okay, we've got the committee member Bernie, and then we'll go board member, committee member McLeod.
Thank you so much, Chair. I really appreciate this presentation about the data up until 2024. And I know that we've made some intentionality around our MATOC contracting. So I am curious how that will fold into policy, some of our policy goals or priorities moving forward. And if you don't have any information yet on that, that's great. But I just want to kind of keep it on our radar.
Yes, from our perspective, any task order contracts that were awarded prior to December 31st, 2024, we do break out results in our report just to see what was happening in those projects and whether there are meaningful differences in the participation and availability and disparity results there. I don't have those results off the top of my head, but they are in the report and I can help you find them if that's something you're interested in learning more about. As for what might have happened 2025 and beyond, it's too soon to say in terms of data that we would have to be able to answer that question. But maybe you have some other thoughts, Edson.
Yeah, we can follow up with that information. I would also note that we also see significant inclusion in our job order contracts, for instance. So there's different contracting tools that we are aware of where we can right size some of the work, including our small works roster, which is also information that was considered in the study that do have impactful inclusion of our small and diverse businesses. And those are things we're mindful of in our analysis.
Thank you.
Member McLeod.
I have a clarification question that may lead to another question. You did a study of 5 years at 1.78 billion, and you were looking at contracts that were awarded. How about a diverse business or a minority-owned business that didn't get a contract? Were their voices considered in your recommendations?
It's a great question. So yes, in a variety of different ways. Our participation analysis is one of the tasks of the study, and that's where we look at what actually happened with your dollars. Our availability analysis is sort of this second piece of the work. In our availability analyses, we don't, not to say we don't care, but as for the purpose of availability, it doesn't matter if a business has been awarded a project or not with Sound Transit. We conducted outreach to them and we asked them to participate in our surveys, agnostic of past participation with Sound Transit. But as part of those surveys, we asked them questions if they had any comments about past work with Sound Transit or experiences about the marketplace in general. And then the businesses that answered our availability question or our availability surveys and indicated interest were also invited to participate in in-depth interviews with one of our community-based sub-consultants. So there were a variety of different qualitative and quantitative opportunities for these businesses to provide their feedback.
Thank you, and I appreciate the study. Thank you for your work.
Yeah, absolutely.
Any other questions? Oh,
Mr.
excellent.
Chair, this is CEO Constantine.
Yes, go ahead, Dan.
Just a brief comment. One of the mechanisms that we are employing to expand the opportunity to secure Sound Transit contracts is the MATOC or Multiple Award Task Order contract process. And we use that for environmental contracts. We use it for design. We're in the legislature this year with a bill sponsored by Representative Zahn asking for the ability to use those for construction contracts. That bill did not quite make it out of the legislature this year, but we'll be working hard over the course of the interim to make sure we have success with that next year. And the opportunity, in addition to saving money and speeding process, the opportunity we have here is to open up the qualifying to do Sound Transit business to many more businesses, including small and emerging businesses, which tend to be more diverse than the very established businesses that have been able to compete for these contracts in the past. And so we're seeing success in these other categories where we've been able to use the MATOC process. And I want to thank our capital team for getting that in front of us and pushing it forward. And we're looking forward to working with legislators to get the ability to use that for construction contracts as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, just thank you. Excellent report and very thought-provoking. And I know we'll be coming back to this topic in the future, but thank you so much.
Thank you all. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go on to the Enterprise Initiative Board Retreat Preview, and I'll ask Alex Krieg, our Enterprise Planning Deputy Executive, to provide the report. Just before Alex gets going, set a little context, especially for newer board members. Last year, we embarked on a process and spent most of the year developing the Enterprise Initiative, which was really a look at every line of business that Sound Transit is in, from design, planning, procurement, construction, operation, et cetera, looking for all the opportunities we have throughout the entire enterprise to control costs and limit expenses, et cetera, in the face of really historic economic headwinds, as I've said before, between 2000 and 2020, we had over 70% escalation in highway and road construction projects. And that's nationwide, really. It's a state, but nationwide. And since 2020 till now, we've had another over 70% escalation. So it's really unprecedented challenge we're facing. And at the fall retreat, we asked the staff to come forward with some scenarios to help sort of coalesce thoughts around how we move forward. They're meant to be thought-provoking and discussion items, not proposals and such. And so at the retreat, we'll be, having that conversation. But again, I view this as really two lines of thinking we need to be focused on. One is within the sub areas, but the sub area priorities. What can the sub areas within our policy and legal framework of sub area equity and other constraints? What can we accomplish and what do we want to accomplish? And then folding those up into a system-wide plan and its constraints or financial plan constraints. So that's just, I just wanted to set that context. And Alex, if I stepped on any of your material, I'm sorry. Feel free to repeat or clarify. So Alex.
Thank you for that. And good morning, Chair Summers and members of the Executive Committee. My name is Alex Krieg and I lead enterprise planning at Sound Transit. Slide 2 covers the purpose of today's presentation, which is to provide a preview of the upcoming board retreat on March 18th in the city of Tacoma, and some of the emerging policy questions and considerations from our scenario development exercise. While we welcome any board member engagement and discussion, our principal objective today is to preview what the day will be like and the policy substance you'll be wrestling with. And before getting into the content itself, I'll provide a brief reminder of our approach for responding to board direction to develop scenarios to update the ST3 system plan. So this slide captures the rules we've been following to bring together the different pieces of the enterprise initiative into scenarios. And as Board Chair Summers mentioned, our goal is not to bring you a Goldilocks option, but instead to use scenarios as a means to surface the key trade-offs and policy choices. And as we start to finalize these scenarios, and given the scale of the agency's affordability challenge, we are appreciating that they will indeed provoke discussion and engagement in recognition of the fact that they come with different impacts to different parts of the district. In short, everyone will find something not to like about these scenarios. That said, scenarios focus on components that have a meaningful impact on addressing our affordability challenges, while emphasizing simplicity in service to highlighting those policy trade-offs. And we are actively leveraging the work that teams across the agency have been doing to ensure that scenarios and other retreat content reflect the most up-to-date input from staff. So this slide is just a simple process graphic for how we plan to get from the last retreat to the next retreat and to bring back scenarios. We are in the home stretch of scenario development and are working to incorporate the input we received from different committees in the board throughout February. We are referring to the component pieces of scenarios as building blocks. These building blocks relate to the different enterprise initiative work streams and are the elements that can be modified and adjusted to save costs or increase financial capacity. And as we shared in February, we will be providing summary information of each work stream's opportunity register and additional supplemental material in advance of the board retreat. So slide 6 shows the tentative agenda and expected meeting flow for the retreat. In addition to the normal kickoff, retreat kickoff and warm-up exercises, we anticipate getting right into a scenario discussion by reviewing different capital program scenarios in recognition of the fact that most of our cost growth is in the capital program, which is also the greatest source of potential cost savings. In addition to describing these illustrative capital program scenarios and their policy implications, we'll also show how they perform against the principles to guide the enterprise initiative that the board adopted in August of last year. From there, we'll continue a trend from the board retreats held in 2025 of breaking board members into small groups, this time according to the different enterprise initiative work streams, so that you can interact with each other and with staff subject matter experts. The purpose of these small group breakouts will be to engage with and understand the impact of the opportunities, tools, and levers available within each work stream that can influence cost savings and financial capacity to deliver as much of the ST3 system plan as possible. Finally, we'll reconvene the full board and seek direction on how to refine and progress our overall effort of getting to an updated ST3 system plan. And so this is my last slide, and it lists out some of the emerging policy questions, implications, and considerations we're starting to see through scenario development in advance of the retreat. I won't go through these in detail, and this isn't intended to be an exhaustive list. Our objective in reviewing this initial summary is to increase your awareness of these topics and to set expectations that we anticipate them as points of dialogue and discussion from our eventual presentation of scenarios at the board retreat. A fundamental point to make is that the voter-approved plan's financial policies require that we have an affordable plan at the system level while ensuring that each sub-area is also affordable. Indeed, and as this committee and the board have discussed, the central tension in this exercise is in balancing the delivery of a regional high-capacity transit system against the varied and various sub-area priorities in the face of the agency's affordability challenges. An important note is that our capital program-focused scenarios initially focus on system-wide affordability, acknowledging that some of the levers in other workstream categories will help address affordability at the sub-area level. In the system-wide category of policy considerations, we anticipate the scenarios will raise questions of relative modal priority between Link and Sounder and ST Express and other projects like parking investments, as well as priorities within these different modal categories. We also expect board reaction and engagement on policy implications of project readiness, how costs are allocated and shared, and how board policies, both financial and otherwise, and the broader policy environment provide opportunities to deliver as much of ST3 as possible. At the sub-area level, it's critical to understand that sub-area equity is generally a proposition about financial capacity relative to the tax base of each sub-area. So the notion that projects and investments made in sub-areas are proportional to the benefits received by that sub-area will inevitably be constrained by the revenues that sub-area can generate. This has structural implications in different directions across the Sound Transit District. As such, and as the board chair noted, we have heard in committees and at the board and are being diligent to seek information about sub-area priorities, recognizing the need to incorporate these in scenarios while being mindful of overall scenario composition, effects on scenario performance, and of each sub-area's financial capacity. Finally, we expect questions and discussions about sub-area specific trade-offs, particularly related to the level of investment of remaining ST3 projects in the different scenarios we are developing. I'll conclude by inviting feedback, questions, or discussions, and note again that our primary objective today is simply to raise awareness of these topics with the executive committee in advance of the retreat, scheduled for just less than 2 weeks from today. That concludes my presentation. Thank you for your time.
Great. Are there questions or comments? And I can't see in the boardroom, so if there are any there, somebody just shout out. Any committee members? Okay, thank you, Alex. Seeing none, we'll look forward to the retreat. Okay, final just item on the agenda today is our really second review of the 2026 Executive Committee work plan. And as we discussed last month, the document contains a list of areas of focus and responsibility of the committee, topics of special interest, and a list of anticipated items and presentations coming to the committee throughout 2028. And we have updated the work plan with new topics based on committee members' feedback to include a passenger restroom policy review. And so I'll throw it open if there's any questions or other topics of interest. And I just, since it came up and it's of interest to me, The Fairgate issue, the board did authorize a study going forward. So remind me if Dow or anybody else, is that going to be an executive committee topic? Or is that another committee?
I believe that's slated to be on the Rider Experience and Operations Committee agenda, but I will double check and let you know, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, okay. Any other questions or topics of interest? Okay, so if hearing none, the document is going to function as our roadmap for the rest of this year. And again, it is a living document. And I invite committee members to reach out with any additional topics they would like to see covered. So this is not a stone tablet. This is a evolving document. Will evolve with the committee. So, all right. Is there any other comments? Well, there is no need for an executive session today. We have no other business. So with that, our next executive committee meeting is scheduled for Thursday, April 2nd at 10:30 a.m. And as always, the meeting will take place in the Ruth Fisher Boardroom and virtually via Zoom. The link to join the meeting virtually will be provided on the Sound Transit website as well as on the meeting agenda. So I thank you all for your attendance. And with that, we are adjourned.